as we talk as a group, I will record this. So, good evening and welcome to our fifth session of our Death and Dying Well series. And this one, an aspect of what it means to die well is if we have the luxury of it, to spend some time before our time comes thinking about what we'd like to do at our time of dying for our funerals and our memorial services. Many of us have just experienced Fred Green's service and on Saturday, and the service, just like we've experienced some others as well, was filled with elements that Fred specifically had asked for. And we made that point during the service because I think it's significant as you're singing these hymns and hearing these poems and the scripture that you realize that Fred himself requested these, and that it speaks something to who he was and where his heart and his relationship with God was. And so that's part of this idea is the blessing of that, of being able to incorporate the dying person or the person who's died wishes into the services can be a lovely thing. And it also just makes things easier for the family and for the pastor who's planning with the family the service to say, this is what he wanted. Okay, great. That's so good to know. So we're going to talk about that a little bit around our tables tonight. But let me start with the basics. And that is, we refer to funerals and memorial services, right? Funerals are with the body, memorial services without. And in the Christian tradition, the funeral or memorial service is a worship service. It's a service of prayer, praise, and proclamation of the good news that death is not the end of the story, but life everlasting, right? Or as I say it, you've probably heard me say this in memorial services or funerals. My dad said it in 40 years of doing funerals. My grandfather said it in 40, 50 years of doing funerals. These two phrases, that the last word in this world is not death, but the last word is life. And this is from a poem. Death is not extinguishing the light, it is putting out the lamp because the dawn has come. Which I love that phrase. So that's an aspect of the good news that we proclaim through Jesus Christ's resurrection and as the church. So when we come to funerals and memorial services, we are not worshiping the person who has died. We're worshiping God and drawing the person who has died into the presence of one another and into God's presence. And we hold the promise of life to come, express appreciation for the person and who they were in our lives and in the life of God, the life of the world. Thank God for them and express how God's goodness shone through their life. It's always a good question even when badness is there too. And we tend to lean into all the good at funerals and memorial services, and which can tend to glorify and glamorize lives in that moment. But a way of kind of thinking of that is that you're lifting up and focusing on that the goodness of the person's life, in the goodness of God that's shown through that person. Doesn't mean that they didn't have the other aspects. I know there are times when we are interacting with families where it is a little like, oh, this person. I'm sure Judy knows that too. Like, there's some negativity here. That might even be problematic to say that this was only good. So we, as pastors, try to figure out how to say that in a way that's not like, and this guy was a kind of a rotten creep at times too, but which you don't have, I don't know. I mean, it's true that we all have our issues and that sort of thing, but you also don't, right? You also don't want to focus on it, but you also don't want to gloss over it particularly for family members who've been abused or hurt or what have you. So that's a tricky thing. But it's, it can be held within the context of our worship of God, that we all struggle in our lives and in our sinfulness, but God redeems us and loves us no matter what, and the good shines through no matter what, that sort of thing. So thankfully, none of you all, we have to worry about that when your time comes.
Talk to our families.
Exactly.
Talk to Judy's cat.
But what you have before you, what's great about this series and this particular section of this series is that it has forced me and Maeve to put together into this packet this particular document that you have before you. Because I've had all these, for 25 years of ministry, have had all these disparate elements, but never had them all together into one packet that I can hand to someone, and now I do. 25 years it took me. Yes. So this is what you have before you, and so to open it, and we're not going to go through all of this, but I want you to have this, and we have questions and answers. What is the difference between a funeral and memorial service? How soon after death does a funeral or memorial service take place? Do I need to secure the services of a funeral director? What are the options for locations and services? And we talk about that specific to this congregation. What are the fees associated with the funeral or memorial service at our church? That's in the back of this packet, is our fee schedule. Who is responsible for producing the order of worship in the bulletin? Who is responsible for submitting the death notice and obituary to the newspaper? These questions and these answers. Who plans the reception following the funeral or memorial service? There used to be a women's fellowship here that did all that, and that's not true anymore. That's not here anymore. So some people come kind of expecting that, so we have to negotiate that. And then people that are very involved in the church, there's kind of people come together to then provide reception, but then there's other situations where there's not necessarily an outpouring of that, so that's a bit of a balancing act. And then we do a number of funerals that really just have a vague connection to the church, and then it's really clear. Are there more green options to embalming and cremation? We're going to talk about that a little bit towards the end, and Liz is going to present. Share with us a bit about the Reno Garden, because someone pretty involved in the church said to me the other day, I didn't know that you could, and I had mentioned it in passing in the conversation, and the person was like, I didn't know we could have our ashes at the Reno Garden. Are you serious? I was like, yes, that is an aspect of our church. So it just highlighted to me how that needs to continue to be something we're sharing with people. And so Liz is going to share a little bit about that. And then we have this funeral planning worksheet. And this is what I want you to do right now. We're going to break up into the pairs and not with a spouse. So you got to not have a spouse or significant other beside you. So and I want you to look at these various, look at all the various things that we're lifting up that you need to be thinking about. Share with one another some of your thoughts about it. And some of it might be interesting to talk about, and some of it you can pass by. There are Bibles and hymnals in the middle of the table, so it would be it'd be nice if you could share. Like, what are some favorite hymns of yours that strike you as, I'd love this in my funeral? Or is there a line in it? In the back of hymnals, you can find hymn by remembering the first line of it and find the first line back there. Maybe everybody knows that, but look at and then these are the typical. I do need to point this out. We're going to reprint these for future, but in the suggested hymns there was a wonky. What do you call it? Not typo, like the setting of it. So if you look at it, My Hope is Built on Nothing is one hymn, and then the next hymn is Less Amazing Grace. My hope is built on nothing. So I didn't notice this until Sarah pointed it out to me. She said, is there a hymn called Less Amazing Grace? I was like, no. Bless Amazing Grace. So there's so they're all through here. So they're kind of you can. So the game is guess the right title of all of these hymns. This is my Father's. World on Eagle's Wings. Right? Cry what a friend we have in Jesus. So it kind of works in a certain way. Anyway. But those are some typical hymns. And those scriptures, I think what I'm going to do for future reference is with these scriptures, put parenthetically, like Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, ... Just so people don't have to look all of them up. Matthew 5, 1 through 10 is the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek. The Romans passage, Romans 8, is, nothing can separate us from the love of God, not height nor depth nor anything in all of creation. And the John passage is the common one that we use of, I've gone ahead to prepare a place for you. I will come and bring you to myself. No one comes to the Father but through me. That passage. So those are some. So just share with the person beside you as you look through these, and it goes on into musical accompaniment, remembrances. What are some of your just kind of initial responses as you think about this this evening? And maybe you can also oh yes, that's the hymn I've always wanted, and then you want to mark that down. But you don't have to. I'm not suggesting you fill all this out this evening, but just kind of engage it. And then, as we say at some point in the packet, if you do fill this out and want to keep it on file here with me, I'm happy to do that. I've done that for other people, and I can pass it off if and when I leave, if I ever leave the church, or if you all leave, I can pass it back off to you. Okay, so just we're going to take just 10 or 15 minutes to share with one another. So partner up and just look through this and have conversations about it. Zoom this here. So can we just do a little sharing out of what was interesting or anything significant come out of your conversations that you would like to share with the whole group? I know there were significant things, but would you like to share them with the group? How was that to think and talk about some of that stuff for people?
I'm grateful that he is really knowledgeable about the Psalms, things that we were looking through, and so thank you. No,
nice.
Really seriously. So we were able to talk about it.
Nice job, Mike.
It's all written down.
All right.
And I started point, so thank you.
Well, one thing I thought of, when you were talking, actually, is you pick hymns, but not every family is a hymn family.
Right.
Is a singing family, and I always ask people, are your people going to sing?
Yes, it's a good point, Jude. Yes.
Not.
Don't have hymns.
You just have Jeopardy plays. Yes.
Yes.
Because a lot of people don't go to church these days.
Yeah.
Aren't used to singing.
No, it's a really good point. There's nothing more awkward than that kind of. Yeah, it's a good point. Yes, Erin.
I struggle with the visitation because I have an old-fashioned thinking that it's a Catholic, practice, and in my own family, it's not something that we do. And actually, we don't really tend to do a lot in this church.
No, we don't.
And but so it's interesting that you go. That's the very first thing you come to, and yet it's the most foreign thing to me. So I had to ask Judy, what is this? I mean, I know what it is, but is it a Catholic? And of course, it's not. Yeah.
But it's true that in my 25 years of ministry, I've had 5 or 6 visitations connected with funerals I've done.
Interesting.
So yeah, it's not very common. So that's a good point. Actually, I appreciate any points like that because maybe we do shift that to a lower thing, or maybe it's not even in there. I don't know because
Or
it
maybe
doesn't
just
tend.
give it a little opening or something.
Yeah, this is something that's possible. We tend not to do it, but if you'd like it.
Or what is the purpose? Because if you're going to have a visitation, and then you're going to have a memorial service, and then you're going to have a burial, what is the purpose of this?
Well, let's ask a Catholic.
It's the trivia. It's 2 days of await, and then the
Thank you,
funeral
John.
service
Catholic.
to
But then you're
sing
supposed
them
to
off.
have like Irish whiskey and a whole.
Yes, I had my grandfather, after my grandfather's wake, we were at my aunt's house, and the oil man had come, and we were all in the kitchen laughing and talking, and he's like, "Oh, you're having a party." And my aunt said, "Oh, my father died." And he's like,
What else? Liz?
I don't like the idea of, for myself, this is personal,
Yeah.
of visitation at a funeral home. But I can see that there might be a visitation, let's say in the ladies, in the Palmer room or something like that, for people who want to visit with a family.
Mm.
I'm thinking back to this weekend when Fred's service was here, and his family were sort of wandering around in here, and you really couldn't
Yeah.
talk to them or speak with them or ask them a question or say a lot of personal things.
So that's an interesting idea. I like that you kind of frame it that way. It's an opportunity for conversation with the family.
"You
engagement
actually
with them.
did one here that I deaconed at,
Mm.
that they had a sort of a visitation before the service
Before the service.
in the sanctuary, where people came in and they had a reception line
Yeah.
that they could talk to the family.
Terry?
That's an alternate that
Yeah,
was
that's-
done here before.
That's very common in the black church,
Mm.
to have a visitation. The body is up front.
Yeah.
Maybe there's no body, but it's like a receiving line, and it's very nice, and
Yeah.
there's music going on. The folks that want to attend that come about an hour early,
Mm.
Yeah.
so it doesn't,
Yeah,
And
and
then they don't expect you to start the service until it's an hour late. No.
well, you can,
Yeah.
they make it clear, I think.
Right.
Good.
But you know, it's fluid, I think,
Yeah.
the times I've had.
Yeah.
I've been to visitations where you may not know the person, but you want to support the person that you do know, the family that you do know. So if you can't make the funeral or you, whatever, you can go
Yeah.
the night or
Just
two
another
before and
Yeah.
just say, basically, gee, I didn't know this person, but I know you and I want to
Yeah.
Right.
show my support, so that's kind of.
Yeah, that's a good.
Right.
So that's, right, it's really good to think about these things.
And-
Well,
Well,
different
is-
perspectives, because then it might change, I mean, it might not change how you feel about it, but it might be like, oh, okay, could I be open to that? Could I want that?
And it also gives a chance for folks who are not in the same faith group that you're with to say, I want to be there for them, but I don't want to sit through a mass, or I don't want to sit through.
Okay, good point, yeah.
Gives them
That's a good
another
point too.
Well, also coming from a working class family, people can't necessarily take a day off when you have it spread out that
That's
way.
another good point.
Because I can think of many, situations where people be working full-time shifts. Once again, I've come from
Yeah.
a blue-collar family primarily, at least on one side. So,
And those nighttime visitations work,
not
yeah.
everybody can do
Yeah,
that.
that's a good
Yours,
that's a good point.
Lenore, people will take a day off.
Okay.
I have had
What else? So that's good. That's a good point about
Well, I just
visitation.
think you did a really great job of putting together so many aspects of things I had never thought.
Oh, good. So
Never.
it's helpful to kind of
Yeah.
ping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. And I stole from another church a lot of their found a template from another church, and I was like, ooh, this is good. And then I adjusted a lot of it.
One
Yeah.
thing we forgot, if you want to add an addendum, is have a guest book. We did not have one.
Yeah.
And
That's what
I
we
went
want.
running home and wrote down everybody I remembered seeing.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
That should be kind of a deacon responsibility, I think.
So I think after that, we recognize that, and then we went
Yeah,
and
actually-
bought 4 or 5.
Yeah, Susan bought some too. Yeah.
On just stuff to go back to church.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
were talking a few minutes about singing hymns, and are you a singing family? When the choir is here, it's really helpful.
Yeah.
Can you assume that the choir will be here?
Okay, so that was in the original, and I deleted it because this is the sort of thing that I might hand to anyone. And that things become complicated very quickly with that, with the pulling the choir together, Jane's involvement, our 2 soloists who it cost something. That being said, where is that line where the choir sings for a church member, or where does the choir not? So that becomes a little tricky.
Especially with a church like this that welcomes people who are not members.
Yeah.
You can't go to a Catholic church that you don't belong to or have associated with and say, I want to have my funeral.
Right. But the choir just couldn't do that, right? I mean, the number of funerals we had, it just couldn't do that. But how do we walk that line is a good question.
Yeah.
Do you have a thought on
that. My funeral or just a funeral?
that? Your funeral.
Yes, I love the choir.
Okay, all right.
Well, as a former choir member, that is perfectly acceptable.
Choir members should definitely get.
Yeah, I think that's where it's tended to land. Is that the choir members get the choirs. Okay, so I don't know about you.
Another place where there's like a little line is occasionally when we've lost someone in our congregation, we've had kind of a gathering when the person has died, like just gather in the Palmer room and sit and talk. It hasn't been a lot.
That's right.
Yeah.
Circle of grief, we called it, or
things
something like that.
And those have things that are so beautiful.
It's
But
true.
is it because it's a sudden death and we're all shocked, and that's why we do it?
Yes.
Or is it because the family has taken the person away and is having a funeral
Somewhere else?
somewhere else?
Yeah.
I think that's one that we've done it for that reason.
Janice.
Was that Janice's
Janice was-
situation? Yeah. Yeah. And then a tragic death might be another
Yeah.
different thing. Well, what else? Before we have 2 other things to talk about. I want Liz to talk about Reno, and I want to talk a little bit about green burials. But anything else in that list of?
The only thing that made me think about Will was my grandmother passed years ago, and I remember feeling that the minister didn't really know her, and I don't think we did a very good job of, I'll call it, providing enough context. Now, maybe he wouldn't, I don't know what happened, but anyway, I was sitting there thinking, wow, boy, I think Grandma would be really disappointed because he didn't really describe her very well at all. And I don't mean to sound critical, but it was a very emotional day for me.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, what a missed opportunity. She was such a great person, and he just didn't know her very well. And it just reminded me of, that's a hard job to get up and talk about somebody you don't know.
Yeah.
And I think I was younger, and I just don't think we really did a great job. And I remember that, I shouldn't remember it. I don't remember it.
I get it.
I remember her very
You
well,
do remember
but I
it.
remember that service being, he didn't really, actually, I think in some ways he described her in a way that I think she would be very uncomfortable with.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
He
That's
just kind of, that was my impression. That's not what Grandma would have said. What did somebody say about her? And it was
Yeah, that's tough, and that does stick with you. We'll sit down with a family, and some families are really good at describing their loved ones, and I'm taking tons of notes, and then other families I'm like, okay, can you give me a little more to work with here? But it is always...
For daughters.
Exactly.
They have a tendency to have.
Yeah.
There might be another list.
Is what?
Of interview questions with the minister, because I was thinking my parents, it was not the person that they had known the best, it was a newer person by the time they passed away in the church. But he had, I don't know if he was reading from a list, but he had very good questions, like, was there anything special about holidays in your family? My mother was artistic, and they were. So, but I remember he had very good questions, so that might be something to work up.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know what sepulcher means.
Sepulcher. So yeah, age, and that's not anything that I had really known about myself. So, but it's someone to take care of your funeral arrangements, apparently. Okay, Liz.
Yes.
I mean, we could keep on. I wish we had more time to talk, but I want to honor our kind of hour and a half time. So, will you talk a little bit about Reno with folks, and then save me five minutes to talk about Green Bay?
I'll be glad to talk about Reno, but I'll also be glad to take questions if anybody has questions about the garden. The garden is going to be 15 years old next year. So that's pretty amazing. Yeah, it's a peaceful place, and it was designed to be both a place for meditation and for prayer, and also for remembering our loved ones. There are lots of things that go on in the garden, but we do allow for cremains to be buried in the garden. And I think there are about 13 people who have been buried in the garden so far. Their names are engraved on a memory bench, a granite memory bench that overlooks the pond. There is a fee for doing that, and that fee covers a prayer service in the garden, digging the hole, covering the hole afterwards, and then a contribution to the endowment for the garden.
Does that go up with inflation? Do we know what it is?
We do know what it is, and it has gone up, but I don't know if it will go up. I'm not on the committee any longer. It's $1,500.
And that's partly to tend it on a yearly basis, and then to replace trees if they need to be
Exactly,
replaced.
that goes into the
There's a lot
endowment,
of
so
work
that
to do.
there's a lot of, as you can imagine, plantings and pruning and fertilizing and things like that. Of course, the cremains go back into the garden, and they fertilize the flowers and the trees that are there. So that's sort of a beautiful image. Yeah, it's a beautiful image.
Those are not in containers there?
There are no containers. It goes straight into the ground, and that was an agreement with the health department. We worked with the health department. We worked with the conservation commission. We'd like to have some more of those trees that are on the hillside overlooking the pond taken out, but we weren't allowed to do that because the roots hold that hillside up, of course. So
Those are the cremains in sort of one area, or are they sort of different areas?
that's a good question. The garden, actually, there's a labyrinth at the beginning as you walk through the archway, and then down below is called the contemplative garden, and that's where the ashes are.
Okay.
So they're really distributed in little holes on the outside, not on the inside where the little pond is, but on the outside.
But people need to remember where their loved one went. There's no markers.
You're right, there's no marker, but we did keep a little map, and that's in the church. And so that if my brother comes and he wants to know where I am, they can look at the map and say, well, she's about right here, kind of thing. But you're right, there's no marker.
Do people have to reserve ahead? Like, do you anticipate at some point there won't be any more room, or?
I don't think there'll ever be a time when there isn't enough room. So you don't have to reserve ahead. The answer is no, you don't have to reserve ahead. You can. Dick and I have done that. We've already gone through and signed the papers and made the payment, so that's on file, and that's all done. So there is a form that you can make out and make that payment and be ready when the time comes.
Don't go, Liz.
In addition to the name on the memory bench, there's also something called a memory book, and your family can, if they want, put a page in the memory book that has a picture of you, and maybe a bulletin from the service, or maybe a little write-up about some of the things you did in church, or some of the things about your grandmother that you might have wanted people to know, so that that's available.
It's really beautiful to think of
Or an obituary.
over time, water seeping in from the rain, gradually diffusing in the ashes, getting picked up by the roots, and next spring being in the leaves so they emerge from the trees.
Yeah.
It's a really beautiful
It is
thing.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And then we've done baptisms out there too, and there's a lovely image of that with the dying and rising with Christ and baptism.
There's a nice article on our website about the garden and how it was envisioned, and walk through the archway and walk down the walkway and northeast, southwest, and something that the architect wrote up about how he designed it and why he designed it. Might be interesting to look at sometime.
I have to say, as a latecomer to this church, you guys are used to each other. You're wonderful and amazingly sensitive. And my lucky day when the Tressels moved in next door and corralled a recovering Catholic. The things you guys do are amazing. I had to say that.
Is there a limitation to the amount of ashes?
I don't think so, Judy. When I have buried them, they come back in a box or a container.
So the
and
whole thing?
Yeah, it's a little bit smaller than a shoebox, and it weighs maybe 4 or 5 pounds, something like that. Sometimes people have them divided. I think Fred's ashes are going to be divided. Some of them are going to be in the garden, and some are going to Wildwood. Mm-hmm. And some people want to take some to the ocean, and some, that kind of thing.
Right.
So that's up to the family.
All there you can.
Yes.
It's a wonderful resource.
I have a question about the flowers.
Sorry?
I just
About
think
flowers?
It would be nice, like, if you had the ashes there, the family may contribute, like, flowers or something to be planted, or do you have that? Ever, like,
No.
do you have extra flowers that
No.
are sentimental?
We allow people to bring flowers on the day of the burial, and you can leave flowers there for that day, but we don't allow flowers. Otherwise, it'd be all kinds of, and who's going to pick them up and who's going to move
I
them.
meant, like, if you contribute some selective flowers for the garden.
I think probably if you wanted to do something like that, you could go through the flower committee, through the Reno Garden Committee, and make a donation, and they would plant them where they wanted to.
Yeah, I was thinking.
Thank you, Liz, very much. 2 other things. One, Tracy and I have a daughter in med school, and one of her first actions in med school was engaging a cadaver. So I do want to make the point that anatomical gift programs are a way to go. It is such a gift that these people, and I'm sure other medical schools do this as well, but UVM. Naomi talked about how they really say to the students, these people have given their bodies. We are honoring them. We'll tell you, that some people allow us to use their name, other people not. You can have their name or not, depending on what you need, but you need to honor these bodies that have been given for this. So it's just something to keep in mind. I pulled out the Harvard Medical School's website. Study of the human body for education, research, and advancement of medical and dental science is an indispensable part of medical and dental education. So each year, Harvard needs human anatomical donations for medical and dental education research. And that's, you do it through a program, through a specific med school. Yes?
It's not just med schools, because it's hospitals
Okay.
as well. Because my grandmother had cancer, and she gave her body to the hospital.
Okay.
And they actually handled the cremation, and they had a service in the hospital, and then the ashes were distributed like wildlife preserve.
And are you saying that the hospital for the use of tissue and that sort of thing?
Yes, to study her, I don't know what parts of her they use.
Okay. Nice, good to know. And then there's that whole aspect of donating organs and stuff.
Ultimately, they must be done with the cadaver.
Yeah, I don't. It's a good question.
Can that be cremated and put somewhere, or you don't know?
I bet, but I don't know.
I think so, Will. I think Tom Liblock donated his body to Tufts.
Is that right?
And then I think Tufts covered the cremation. And then we got the ashes back here from that.
Oh, okay.
When
I believe that.
the night that Carol died, at what?
Hold on, Judy. I want people to hear what you. That's all right. So, let's see. Do we want to? Yeah, go ahead.
No, I don't.
No,
Yeah, no, I want to hear what you're.
I want. The donation place, New England donation something, called and said, we'd like to, to use Carol's body and parts of her organs and that.
And had she signed up for, or you all?
They called out of the blue.
Wow.
At 11 o'clock the night.
Oh my gosh, that is intense. I've never heard of
Luckily, her
that.
sisters were with me, so I could, we could make the decision together.
Can I ask will you share how you made that, or?
Well, they wanted to use her skin. And she was always very sensitive about having, her skin was wrinkled and she, and all this. And I thought that was actually an honoring that her skin had value.
Oh, that's beautiful. So you said yes.
I said yes, yeah. But with I think the fact that her sisters were with me really helped.
What a beautiful honoring of that. That's a beautiful way of thinking through it. But also a good warning that can happen. Because I didn't know. I've not heard that before.
I know. How did that?
I think the hospital must get us.
That's interesting. That seems strange. So, Liz, what?
We failed to say that there's a copy of the agreement for future placement of cremains in the packet that Will gave us. Is this agreement that I alluded to? That we could go ahead if you want.
And then kind of the background and some other information.
Yes, terms and conditions. Yeah.
All right, so let me say I don't know much about green burials. Maybe somebody in the room knows more, but let me say this to start with. May 8th at 7 p.m. in the library is a presentation from Marianne de Blasi, and the presentation is on Green for Real, Earth-Friendly Farewell. Do you know what?
I know Marianne, and
you
I know a little about green burials. This
okay.
is exciting.
Great. So I'll say what I know, and then say more, Terry. But I had a conversation with Costello's funeral home. They said remarkably there's not a whole lot of requests for green funerals, but it's coming up a little more here and there. Wildwood Cemetery, supposedly cemeteries have to have a section that's specifically geared towards green burials, and there's certain policies and procedures that have to be in place. Wildwood does not have those, so you cannot do a green burial in Wildwood. But when they get that request at Costello's funeral home, they will say there's like Mount Auburn and West Roxbury and maybe a couple of other places around that aren't exclusive. Oh, Lexington is another one, but you have to be a Lexington resident. And it's expensive supposedly to be buried in these places with green burials. But let me say that it is the use of both cremation and embalming are terrible for the environment. Supposedly, cremation of a human body is the equivalent of what is it? Of the amounts of 535 pounds of carbon dioxide for just one creation. That's a 600-mile-plus car ride down to from Winchester to Philadelphia and back, for instance, to cremate a body. It takes 90 minutes to reduce human remains and then releases all of those toxins. So even cremation, and then to say nothing of the conventional burials with formaldehyde, and you are not required to do that unless you're going to show the body. Is what they say. You can opt out of that, right? They will of the embalming. But then when there is embalming going on, then you have certain requirements of concrete or fiberglass or plastic that also is accompany that, and then and then 6 feet down in the ground, and that also embalming releases huge amounts of unnecessary chemical waste. Vaults disrupt the natural ecosystem. Many cemeteries maintain a manicured aesthetic where plants and foliage are functional pieces of art, and lawns are highly controlled with gas-powered motors, pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers. So there is, right, so there's some issues here. But green burials are becoming more and more a question that people are asking. And tell us more, Terry.
Well, I went to a workshop at Mount Auburn about green burials maybe 10 or 15 years ago, and I think nowadays it's a shroud, and they will put in almost something like mushrooms with you, because that it hastens the return to the earth. But what I wondered about was, because it's just I said, well, what about, the guy said, actually, we do use a cement vault, because we can't have the ground going like that, because then they can't mow it. This is Mount Auburn, which is like a walled garden, you know. So I said, how does that work? How do you decompose if you're in a vault?
Yeah.
Just like and the fellow said, no bottom.
No bottom.
Yeah.
I see.
Just walls.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. But I can't wait to hear Mary Ann on May 8th.
Yeah, May 8th at 7 p.m. And they are, and you can, depending upon the town and the state, you can bury a loved one in a backyard, but you have to get permission to do that. And I don't know if this town grants that permission. So that's a good question. But there's this whole dynamic of the sort of natural, the shroud, the lowering of the body. I mean, our disconnect, our belief that right, our separation from the earth is so profound in so many ways of our life, and it's also profound in our deaths too. And so much of it is unnecessary, the way we encase ourselves and embalm ourselves and da-da-da-da. It's just another kind of illness of our society, I think.
I don't know if I missed it, but has there been any discussion of burial at sea or the equivalent for civilians?
No, but that's another thing in terms of ashes or also the body.
I'd go for it with my body and just sink slowly to the bottom of the ocean and be fed upon by other creatures.
There you go.
It's no different than the tree.
So I don't know the process of that.
You can do that. You can do that. There are companies that will do that. They take X amount of miles off of shore. And
Interesting.
You have to pay permits, and there has to be so many holes in the casket. It's 21. I mean, so that it is actually an alternative.
Mm-hmm. But then you have like people saluting you, and is it like the?
No, you can just, if you love the ocean, you don't need to be a service personnel. There are private companies that will take you there.
I mean, this is such an amazing, I mean,
So-
everybody's got such deeply felt things that this is bringing out.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's amazing. Just thank you for doing this.
Yes, of course. So there's also Green Burial MA.org is the website that will give you as more information than I'm giving you here. It was kind of interesting. I mean, you know, again, it's like it's really not come. Did it come in your ministry? Did someone come to you and say, "Hey, I'd like to do a green burial with my"? Yeah, it hasn't come to me either. So maybe this presentation from Mary Ann, I mean, maybe we as a town need to begin to encourage it and support it, right? Because it seems important. So, and they're saying, that website says, encourage it. It's such an important thing to consider. Okay, so it's 8:05. I just want to end with a Wendell Berry poem that just is very fitting for this conversation. And if you don't know Wendell Berry, you should. He is amazing. And such a voice of, returning to the earth and resisting a society that wants to pull us into individuality and disconnect from the earth and from our bodies. So this is it's called Testament. Okay, Wendell Berry, his last name is Berry. They live their family. He farms in Port Royal. So that'll come up in this. And just so you see, because I find this is important to me. It might not be. Just so you see, this is not a short poem, but it's going to be engaging. You'll enjoy it. So it's that long, and then it goes over to here, okay? So settle into it for a moment. Don't keep thinking that I'm going to end. All right? That's it, because sometimes with poetry, I'm like, and then it keeps on going. Okay. So this will be worth it. This is what Wendell Berry says. Oh, and also, just as you see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 different kind of chapters of the poem, and each chapter has a different rhyme scheme or meter that he's working with. So when it changes, don't let that throw you. He says, it's called Testament. Dear relatives and friends, when my last breath grows large and free in air, don't call it death. A word to enrich the undertaker and inspire his surly art of imitating life. Conspire against him. Say that my body cannot now be improved upon. It has no fault to show to the sly cosmetician. Say that my flesh has a perfection in compliance with the grass, truer than any it could have striven for. You will recognize the earth in me. As before, I wished to know it in myself, my earth that has been my care and faithful charge from birth, and toward which all my sorrows were surely bound, and all my hopes. Say that I have found a good solution, and am on my way to the roots. And say I have left my native clay, at last to be a traveler. That too will be so. Traveler to where? Say you don't know. But do not let your ignorance of my spirit's whereabouts dismay you or overwhelm your thoughts. Be careful not to say anything too final. Whatever is unsure is possible, and life is bigger than flesh, beyond reach of thought. Let imagination figure your hope. That will be generous to me and to yourselves. Why settle for some know-it-all's despair when the dead may dance to the fiddle hereafter, for all anybody knows? And remember that the heavenly soil need not be too rich to please one who is happy in Port Royal. I may be already heading back, a new and better man toward that town. The thought's unreasonable, but so is life, thank the Lord. So treat me even dead as a man who has a place to go and something to do. Don't muck up my face with wax and powder and rouge as one would prettify an unalterable fact to give bitterness the lie. Admit the native earth my body is and will be. Admit its freedom and its changeability. Dress me in the clothes I wore in the days round. Lay me in a wooden box, put the box in the ground. Beneath this stone a berry is planted, in his homeland as he wanted. He has come to the gathering of his kin, among whom some were worthy men, farmers mostly who lived by hand, but one was a cobbler from Ireland. Another played the eternal fool by riding on a circus mule, to be remembered in grateful laughter longer than the rest. After doing what they had to do, they are at ease here. Let all of you who yet for pain find force and voice look on their peace and rejoice. Amen. Amen. Go in peace. Thanks you all for sharing.